Hello, good evening, Matilde. How are you? Are you okay?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Great. So let's start the class. All right, we're going to start with our lesson for today. Yesterday we got to see past continuous very simply, but I want to review that a little bit because again, it's important to understand the difference, at least, right? The difference between the past continuous and simple past, just because it's useful when telling stories and when even structuring, right, your own paragraph. So, what do you remember about the past continuous and the way we use it?
Okay, so what we talked yesterday was well, first this story narration. Um, you could use it with past continuous also when you are how to say it saying, for example, when you're also mixing times. Let's say I was I was talking to her when I received, and I will use a past simple there, a call, when I received a call. Yeah, those two. And yeah, well, I can recall that now. Yeah.
Good. Yes, those are the most important, right, functions we can say that it has, right? It can be the context, right, the parameter in which you are going to be describing order sequences in the simple past, as you said very well. It's also related to, again, perhaps it's not that common, but for repetitive actions, right, that happen just for a period of time in the past, right? We were going to parties a lot during that time, right? It means that that action happened a lot, but only during that time. But again, it's up to you, Matilda. Why? Because you have to decide if that action, that repetitive action happened a lot, very often, and it was for many years. Perhaps instead of the past continuous, you can use the expression used to, right? We used to go to a lot of parties. But that's just because the time range and frame that you have is bigger than the one for the past continuous, right? The past continuous is always shorter and more specific in terms of time. When it's related to habits and routines, it's always better to use simple tenses, right? And used to is a simple tense as well. So yeah, we have that. That's good. I want to start actually working on this exercise. Um, and we are going to use some of these transitional words using past. All right. And I'm going to show you this time, but then I have to send this to you. But I already showed you. I'm going to do it once again. These transitional words, we have a big list, right? And remember, to use these transitional words, we need this structure, right? Complete idea, period, or semicolon, plus this transitional word or phrase with a comma, and then a complete idea. But just in case, you also have some other variations, and they are explained here. But for this story, because you're going to tell me a story now in past, and we're going to use the usual one or two paragraphs, but we are going to use this plus the past continuous that we know and the simple past for definite and specific actions. But this is going to be our main, let's say, list of transitional words. You have organizing by number, right? This is very simple. Initially, firstly, secondly, thirdly. First of all, to start with, you have a lot of options there. Showing continuation, afterwards, eventually, next, after this, after that, or after plus a phrase. Then summarizing or repeating information, right? To repeat as stated before, as mentioned earlier or above. Discretion, resumption, concluding, summarizing. You have those two activities. So you have this there. Okay, now let's use some of these words, please, to tell a story in the most organized way possible. All right, it has to be a past story. You need to give me some context, right? Remember, and the context can appear at any moment during your story. It can be at the beginning, then you mention certain, right, specific detailed actions, then you give me one more context, and then one action interrupts that. So it's a play, right, between simple tenses and continuous tenses. You can also use, if you remember, the present perfect. And if you know how to use the past perfect, perhaps we didn't see this in detail yet, but you can use it as well. Okay, all past tenses that you can use are allowed here, plus these transitional words. I don't know if you have questions, Matilde. Let me know, please.
No, I don't have questions. Just, a short story, and I have to do it in one paragraph.
Yes, it can be, well, the time we've been using it was enough for one paragraph. So yes, let's have that limit, one paragraph.
Okay.
But in case you finish that, well, before the time that we got, you can start a second paragraph to see how you can continue that. Okay, but the expected is one paragraph, but you can expand more if it's possible.
Okay,
Right?
and I have to choose story. Any story.
Yes, any story. It can be your story, it can be right from your experience, or even you can tell me something about a movie or series that you watched. Okay, anything that is in past that has a sequence, because here it's important that you have a context, that you have a sequence of actions, because the idea is that you don't perhaps have to use all of these transitional words, but at least you have to use the ones that organize your thoughts. For example, these ones, and the last ones. At least you have to use one or two of each group, okay, of these three groups. These two here are optional because these are things that you don't have to mention necessarily, but these three groups contain transitional words that are important for your organization. All right, so the only condition then, besides having a story, yours or anybody else's story, is that you use also these transitional words, respecting and following the rules that we know for commas, for periods, and semicolons. That's it in general.
Okay.
All right?
Right.
Good. So let's go please to the document. We're going to use the same document. Matilde, this is going to be still part of Unit 3. So you can also do that in that part of the chart. Let me know when you are there and you're ready, please. In the meantime, I'm going to start with I'm going to open the clock to start the stopwatch.
Okay, I'm going to the document. Okay, I'm there. I have to go to unit 3.
3, please. Unit 3. Yes. You have one there, but you can do it down below.
Okay.
All right, good. So are you ready? Let me know, please.
1 second, thinking about this story. Okay, yeah, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So let's have please again 6 to 7 minutes to have that paragraph, possibly the starting of a second paragraph. But again, the main idea is at least one that is well structured. Okay, so please, you may begin now. I'm going to start with the timer. Okay, we check in 1 more minute, please. Okay, so let's take a look at what you got so that we can, again, give some feedback and go to our lesson for today.
Okay.
Here with you. All right, good. So I'm here. Great. You have a lot of things over there. That's perfect. Let's read everything you got, please.
Okay. I would like to tell you about the time I lived in Sao Paulo. It was my last weekend there, and I wanted to go clubbing with my roommate. We didn't have money nor cell phones. We had been stolen a week before. We just had enough money for the bus for returning home, 4 reales. We had a great time at the club. When it was time for leaving, we went straight to the bus station and we realized that our bus didn't work at the night shifts. That meant that we had to take 2 buses in order to get home. We were freaking out. We only had enough money for taking one. So my roommate decided to talk to one of the chauffeurs and beg for a free ride. I think we looked so desperate that the bus driver finally agreed to do it. It was a tough night.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Good. All right, you had great production up to that part. We're doing it great. Again, few details, recommendations for punctuation and some details, but in general, again, great. So let me see again the connection between the ideas. Great. So here again, you have options, and it's not that they are going to be incorrect, but you can be even more formal. So here, for example, I'd like to tell you about the time, right? You can say things that are not necessary because it is still correct, but they can make it better. All right. One can be in which or when. Okay, one of those is going to be fitted there. That's going to state that what you have here is a clause related to time. Okay, it's going to be an adjective clause related to that time. Okay, about the time, what time? The time when or in which I lived in Sao Paulo. All right, so that's optional again, but it's if you want to be formal. Then I was my last weekend there and I wanted goods. Here, once again, I'm mentioning also optional things so that you decide. Here you have the optional comma, right? Why is it optional? Because actually, this is not going to be optional. Why? Because here you have, it was my last weekend there and so I thought that this was still also related to you, but actually here the subject is different. It is it, impersonal. All right, so because you have to complete ideas with two different all right subjects, we're going to use that comma. Okay, so it was my last weekend there, comma, and I wanted to go right clubbing with my roommate. Good. We didn't have money nor cell phones. Good. We had been stolen a week before. Okay, so this is clarification. Again, is good. Now remember, in Spanish also we use that dash, but in formal or academic English, you're going to use, remember, the M dash, that is the double dash. Okay, actually, we have a longer dash, but we don't have it in our keywords. All right, but if you write double dash, you're going to have that long one. And remember, they are going to be just right to the two words around it. Okay, so just right next to cell phones and right next to we. in this case. Okay, so we had been stolen a week before. We just had enough money for the bus. All right. So here you have you have to decide something. Why? Because you have complete ideas, a lot of complete ideas here. This is the first one, right? We didn't have money nor cell phones, right? Then you are explaining this, and then you're saying we just had enough money for the bus. So this is another complete idea. If we have this here, it means that we are just separating this with commas, because this, remember, this dash works as comma, or as a comma in this case, right? So it cannot be the case. So when it is not going to be the case, instead of one more dash at the end, you're going to take, as this is the last part of this explanation, remember, this is going to be like the clarification of something that is not clear over here. For example, what happened to your cell phones. All right, so this is going to be mainly working as a colon. And as that is working as a colon, here you have one more time two options. Instead of that one, we can use either a period or we can use a semicolon. All right, and again, why? Because we just had enough money is another complete idea, and it's not going to be directly related to this one, because it would be incorrect, just because it's a complete idea by itself. All right, so again, you decide, but you have the option of a semicolon, or once again, you can use a period if you believe it's not affecting the meaning or the way you want to transmit your information. Okay, so we just have enough money for the bus for returning home. Good. This is just clarification, and it's a phrase, right? Or reales. And that's good, because it's not a complete sentence, so it works with a comma. Good. We had a great time at the club. Yes, when it was time for leaving, we wanted yes, and yes, and here this is optional. No, the one above I thought was optional. This one is optional, right? Because you're saying we, so good. And the other option, remember, is that instead of using and we, you can say directly and realized, right? We went straight to the bus and realized that, so you avoid the possible usage of comma, right? That our bus didn't work, right? At the night shifts, okay? This, because you're talking about the shifts, is not related to the night itself. That's why we're not going to use this one, and because it's just a plural general idea, all right? Okay. During the night shifts or the night shifts. Now, if you realize that's the end of your complete idea, it is from this part up to this part. No, from this part. Okay, so you have first a complex idea with when and we, and then you have this possible comma, but it's still part. So it's one sentence. This is only one sentence. This is the end, because that meant that this is going to be subject, verb, complement, right? So this is a new idea. So once again, here you use either semicolon or period, right? So that meant that we have to take, good, yes, we were freaking out. We hear the same, right? Even though the ideas are so related to one another, they are already complete. Okay, so again, this is just if we want to be very formal, but this is, so we were freaking out. We only had the option here. Again, if you want to avoid the overusage of punctuation, is that you can create a connection between the two ideas, because grammatically speaking, you one more time need a semicolon or a period. All right, but if you think that you've been using that a lot, that can happen, then try to look at connection. Here you can say, because, right, we only had enough money for taking. Okay, that's a solution. In that way, you don't use a comma, you don't use punctuation, you're using well, a way to connect those two ideas. All right, but again, that's a suggestion. So once again, I'm going to write all the possible solutions: the semicolon, the period, or because. All right, you always have to see which one works the better in your case. We only had in my mind for taking one. Good. Now here, again, as so, remember, so has at least 5 or 6 different meanings. One of those is the consequence, right? The result of something. And when that's the case, so is usually a fanboy, right? And as a fanboy,
Yeah.
it can be used with two punctuation marks. It can be used with a comma, or it can be used with a semicolon, but only if you have commas before and commas afterwards, right? If not, using a period or a semicolon with no commas, it's going to be too strong for us. So all right, so one recommendation here would be change this period to a comma and use the so, because the connection has to be clear. All right, this is the thing that is creating these concepts. But if you want to set that idea, change the so to a transitional word, because so is a coordinating conjunction. It works with commas. You can use a transitional word like thus, as a result, right? Something that shows the result of something. Okay, so again, the possible solutions would be comma and so, or you can also use semicolon if you have comma, or you can change that to a period and thus comma and the next part. Okay, so those are the three possible solutions: comma, semicolon, or a transitional word. Okay, so imagine we use thus. So thus, my roommate decided to talk right to one of the first and back. Good, the same subject and three. I think great to do it. It was a tough night. Great. Okay, that's the last thing I have to say. I don't know if you have questions about those details for punctuation or the connection with the words. Let me know, please.
Yeah, it's the part. It's very clear. I just have one question. While I was writing, I wasn't sure if I that part that it says we had been stolen. I wasn't sure if I should put yeah, past perfect or we were stolen.
Actually, it's great that you're using here the past perfect because this happened before this message, right? We didn't
Yeah.
have money nor cell phones, so that is past. So the action of being stolen happened before that, so the past perfect works straight over there. If you say that in the simple past, what you wanted to say, it's good. It is still going to be correct and there is not going to be a mistake. But this is just giving the extra clarification that, of course, it happened before. It means, all right, the only thing that you can do with that, Matilde, is that if you want, you can eliminate the word before, because with the past perfect, it's already clear. But if you use the simple past, you have to clarify that it was before. Okay, that's the only thing. All right? Good. Great. Great. I believe it's good because, again, in general, the usage of the past tenses is great. All right. Just these details because, again, it's related to the differences, right, we have between English and Spanish in terms of writing, at least. And here, again, don't be afraid to use periods or semicolons. It's going to be more common than using commas as we do in Spanish. But that's the only thing. All right. Good. So great, I believe it was good. You got to produce a lot, which is great. Now it means that we can go to, I'm going to close this one, but remember, I have to send you that document as well so that you can use it in the future, well, tasks that we are going to have. Okay. So let's see our simple lessons to cover what Pearson is telling us to cover. We finish with the past continuous, so very simple. Okay, to talk about preference once again. So we have ways to express preference, right, Matilde? What ways do you know that you can use to express this?
Like would, I would like.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Also, we have so only verbs. For example, here you have the possible verb. So preference, what is the verb for preference?
Like.
Yes, but the verb, what is the verb that comes directly from this noun, from preference?
Prefer.
Prefer, good. Now, if I ask you, what is the difference between, because you can say I prefer and you can say I would prefer. What is the difference between those two? When do you say I prefer and when do you say I would prefer?
I'm trying to think of a situation. Honestly, I'm not sure.
It can be related also. Prefer expresses one thing, would prefer expresses something similar, but only for a specific situation. I can tell you before giving you more details that would prefer is closer to would rather. Okay, so would rather, would prefer, those two are used in the same situation. For example, when do you use would rather? In what type of situations would you say, I would rather go to the party? Or I would prefer to go to the party?
I mean, with rather, usually there's like another option. Like I would rather go to the party
Yes.
than going to a bar. I don't know.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great logic. And it goes there. The difference goes there. All right. I can tell you now before taking a look at that. Prefer is for general preference. Okay. Some things that you always prefer. Right. For example, if you say, right, I prefer to watch, or yes, I prefer to watch movies, it means that that's what you always prefer. You can have some exceptions, but that's your preference, right? To watch movies. But you are only going to say, I would prefer, right, to watch a movie, as in the case of would rather, right? When you have options, or when you are only preferring that in a specific moment, right? That is not always the case. So one is general, prefer, and would prefer is more specific. You can have actions, as you said, as would rather, but the main idea is that, again, general, specific. Okay, let's have that in mind to cover this one. I believe that we have interesting structures that can be useful because some of these structures, just two or three, can be advanced. It depends how you use them. All right, so it can be interesting. Would rather, let's read this, please.
Okay. To express a preference when different choices are possible, you can use would rather because it is followed by the base form of a verb. It functions as a modal auxiliary. I would rather stay home. I'd rather play tennis.
Great, right? Is what you said. You have options, so I would rather, right? Do something. Then you can mention one other activity as you did. The formula is very simple. Then, now this is important. We also have to use, in this case, the base verb in the second part, right? So then study on a beach, or well, that's something I said that, but we don't have to use here the gerund in this case. We have rules. We would prefer to use infinitive, gerund, base verb. Usually in this case, it is going to be the base verb. All right, so let's read this,
Okay.
please.
When the choices are named, they are separated by then. I would rather go to the beach than study on such a nice day. I would rather be rich than poor.
Correct, right? So in this case, saying than studying, it is going to be incorrect just because at the beginning we have would rather that is telling us that we need base verb. Okay, just the base verb. But again, you can use a verb or you can use a noun, as you can see in the second example, right? I would rather be rich than poor. That's a noun. Now, this is also very interesting, right? And here you use the simple past, but it's not past, it is present, right? When you want someone, perhaps, right, to do something for you, but using would rather. Let's read directly the example with the note, please, Matilda.
Okay, I would rather you drove me home. Note, although the simple past tense is used in the above example, it refers to present or future.
Good, right? So When you prefer that someone else do something, you do that, right? I would rather you, right, took that to your father, right? But now I'm talking about the present, I'm talking about now or even in the future, not the past, right? But we use the past because it's subjunctive, right? Whenever we use subjunctive in English, we always use simple past or we use be in the plural form, right? Always. Like, for example, you must know you say, right, I wish she were my girlfriend, right? And that's correct. We don't say she was, at least in grammar, right? So it's the same rule. Here, that's why we're using simple past, because the simple past is the subjunctive form of the present. All right, so again, that's why this can be interesting. Um, this is the same, but in negative. Let's also read the example plus what we say about person A and B, please.
Okay. I'd rather you didn't do that. Person A, do you mind if I stop to do some shopping on the way home? Person B, I'd rather you didn't. I don't want to miss the beginning of the hockey game on TV.
Good. Great, right? So again, one mistake here, what could it be? To say, I'd rather you don't, right? That's incorrect. We don't say that. Grammatically speaking, it's going to be incorrect, right? I'd rather
Okay.
you didn't do this now. All right, so again, why? Because we're using simple past, we are borrowing that as a present expression. In negative, very simple. I believe we're not going to read this. It's just about you, right? So I'd rather not touch a bus. I'd rather not go to that party, right? So rather not plus still the base verb, right? It says the subject and would are often contracted, right? So I'd, she'd, we'd, and so on with the contraction. Now, that's would rather. I don't know if you have questions about that. We're going to apply this again in one exercise, but I don't know if I have questions about these differences, at least with the second person involved in the last two ideas. What do you say?
I think it's clear. Yeah.
Good. So let's keep going. Now, prefer. I would like you to read this, please, Amy.
Okay. To say what is generally preferred, you can use prefer plus infinitive or prefer plus gerund, as in the following examples. I prefer to eat at home, prefer plus infinitive. I prefer eating at home, prefer plus gerund.
Yes. In both cases, it's the same. It is correct, right? So would rather always with base verb, but prefer infinitive and gerund, right? If we use base verb here, it is going to be incorrect. All right. Now, this is what I was telling you. These structures are pretty interesting, and many people make a lot of mistakes with this. Because, for example, look, instead of using than, we have to use to mention two objects, in this case with prefer. If you want to use than with prefer, you have to use rather than, right? Again, this is simple now, and this is part of the 8-8 course, but these rules are important to remember for the future. Okay, so let's read this, please. It's important that we read this information to remember.
Okay, prefer plus noun to noun. I prefer hot chocolate to tea. Prefer plus doing something to doing something different. I prefer drinking hot chocolate to drinking tea. Prefer to do something rather than do something else. I prefer to drink hot chocolate rather than drinking tea.
Great, right? So here the rules can be a little bit confusing. They don't have like a specific sense or logic. It's just grammatical rules. Okay, so for example, the last one is something you have to remember. If you use infinitive, you're going to use rather than, but after rather than, you're going to use the base verb, right? You're not going to use infinitive and you're not going to use gerund. You're going to use in the base verb. Okay, so in the first case, only nouns, right? I prefer this noun to this noun. In the second case, two gerunds, right? I prefer doing this to doing that. In the third case, infinitive rather than and base verb. Okay, let's try to have that in mind. We're going to try to apply this in some examples. But this is the way we have to compare things when talking about general preference. Okay, prefer. Now, would prefer We're not going to read everything, just explanation, please. I'm going to mark it, plus those two questions.
Okay. The structure would prefer is used to talk about what someone wants in a specific situation, not all the time, and is followed by an infinitive verb or a noun. See the following examples. Would you prefer spaghetti or fish for dinner? Would you prefer to catch a bus or take a taxi home after the party?
Great, right? So this is what we said. Not all the time, just for a specific situation, right? So it's different when you say, I prefer to eat home, or I would prefer, right, to eat home. Just again, one of them is general preference. The other one is something that you're deciding for a specific situation, right? That is temporary perhaps, or just for that one time. All right, so very easy. And here we are using mainly infinitive or nouns. Okay, I prefer to do something, or I prefer something. Okay, that's going to be the detail over here as well. Nouns or infinitives. That's the most common thing to use with would prefer. Now, to use rather than, as I told you, you have to use infinitive and you use then the base form, right? And I'm going to read that one. I prefer to go skiing this year rather than go on a beach holiday, right? So again, infinitive rather than and base form. Okay, and that will be it. Now we have to apply this because I believe it's important to remember at least these structures: comparison with prefer, would prefer. But first, I want to know if you have questions before we go to our second writing practice, Matilde. Let me know, please.
I think it's clear. Yeah.
All right, good. So we're going to try to use the most important ones. I think I'm going to do this. Second. All right. This information is available here so that we can take a look at the formulas. Okay, you have one over there. I think that's the most important one. Yeah. And this one perhaps. Yes, until that part. So that's here, all right, in our document. So you have direct access to it, but once again, you always have access to the presentation, so you can take a look at that. Let's use this in one way, and let's try to make it like this, all right? Let's try to first, again, dividing what we did. Remember, for general preference, you only have prefer, right? I prefer. So give me first an idea of the general preferences that you have for the things that you want to share with me. Okay, again, it can be true or you can make up something, it doesn't matter. All right, but about 4 or 5 things. Okay, for example, you prefer what? You prefer, I don't know, series to movies, something like that. Okay, so give me 4, 5 general preferences that you have, and then you are going to give me a description of what would you prefer under a certain circumstance or under a certain situation. Okay, but trying to pick the option that you don't usually prefer. Okay, so one example would be, I prefer series to movies, right? But in the next paragraph or in the next set of ideas, you're going to tell me, and I would prefer to watch movies, right? If or when, or you give me the specific situation under which you would prefer the option that you don't usually pick. All right, that's going to be the logic. First, again, a list of things that you prefer, and using these 3 structures. Okay, noun to noun, gerund to gerund, and infinitive rather than base form. So 3 like that, and then you can repeat 1 or 2, and then you go to work with, it's not here, with would rather or with a would prefer. Okay, with one of those 2. And you tell me again the circumstance before or after when is the time in which you would rather or you would prefer do or to do in the case of rather or would prefer the other option. All right, I'm repeating that, but I want to know if you have questions or if it's clear, Matilde. Let me know, please.
Yeah, I think it's clear. So now I would start with the other chart. I mean, the prefer part, and then
Yes,
I
correct.
would, with that sentences, I would continue with this part. That what happened
That
if
can
I
be
chose the other.
correct. And in
Okay.
the second part, remember, in the first part, you always use prefer, right? Because prefer is for general preference. But in the second part, you have to mix your ideas with would rather and would prefer because they can be used under the same circumstances. Because you have options or because they are just specific decisions made at one specific moment. All right, so in the second part, you mix these two, would rather and would prefer. That's it. I don't know if you have other questions or comments or to, well, verify something.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go one more time, please, to our document.
Okay.
Just in case I am going to be here with would rather. Now you have actually would rather in the document. Mm, okay, I'm going to be here with would prefer and rather than. All right, so again, you tell me if you're ready and we can start with the timer.
Okay, so I continue unit 3 or right after the chart?
Yeah, let me see. I think one thing, please. Just the last three. Yes, we're still in unit 3. So let's also do it in unit 3, please.
Okay.
All right, good. So we may begin now. I'm starting with the stopwatch.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I do these 5 sentences. And now I have to do the rather part, right?
Yes. Now that you have a description of your general preference, usually you write you prefer something to something. Now show me perhaps in under what circumstances you would prefer or you would rather do or to do according right to the one you're using the other activity or the other thing that you didn't pick or that you don't usually do.
So just an example, like I would rather have falafel if...
Okay, I'm reading here, for example, yes. If you usually prefer the first one when it comes to falafel, you have to now describe, it's up to you. At the beginning, you can describe very briefly the circumstance or afterwards, right? But you would say, I would prefer this other option if you can give me an if, or you can give me a description, right, of the circumstance under which you would choose that other option. Okay, and the same for the other ideas. All right.
Okay. So, but in this situation, I mean, if I use this kind of, it has to be present, right? It shouldn't be like the past situation where I am
Yes,
asking
no,
someone
because
else.
for past, we would need to use a different model, right? The perfect models. And in this case, we're just using models. So they are going to be present, but also can be referred to future. But yes, only present, no past.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to see how you're doing to try to, again, perhaps finish the last detail together.
Okay.
Good. Finish that last one and we read everything, please.
Okay. I read it. Okay, I read.
Yes, please.
Okay, I prefer hummus to falafel. I prefer listening to choirs to listening to operas. I prefer to have Pilates classes rather than yoga classes. She prefers summer season to winter season, and they prefer going out rather than staying home. Okay.
Great. That's the
I
general
continue.
preference, right? Now
Yeah.
let's see some exceptions or what circumstances make you pick or choose a different option.
Okay, I would prefer falafel if it is made by my Syrian friend Abdul. I would prefer listening to operas if the performance is directed by the famous director Pedro. I would rather have yoga classes if I feel the need for stretching. And she would prefer winter season if it is snowy season.
Thank you very much. Good. Okay, so again, let's see the details. In general, again, great. We recommendations in, for example, in case of number two with prefer, it will be as you have the same verb, perhaps you can avoid that one, or it's not necessary, right? It's not incorrect if you have it again, but you can avoid that one, even though it's with we said, right, that it has to be um, with gerund. So that's why perhaps we have to write it. But under another circumstance, it can be avoided, right? Just because it's the same activity, just because of that, right? But again, that's just a clarification. Then here, when we have the, let's say, the seasons, it's better if you say directly, for example, something, I prefer the summer to the winter, right? Without saying specifically the season. And it's better to use the article directly. Okay, like for example, we are going to say here the summer, but instead again of the summer season, I'm just marking this here, just the summer. Okay, so I prefer the summer to the winter, and that's it. All right, then good. Here, this with capital letter when we have this idea, all right, of a nationality. Now here, this is a suggestion. Remember, this is present, yes, but I don't know if you remember the present unreal. What is the present unreal? I don't know if you know something about it.
I mean, it does ring a bell, but I am.
It is referred to what I told you, remember, when to use she were. For example, right? I wish she were. That's not the conditional, but you use the same structure. The past or the present unreal is a present idea, but that is not true. All right. And to use that, you use the past, but the meaning is present. Okay. I know that you asked me here if it has to be present. Yes, it has to be present. But remember that you can use the subjunctive, and the subjunctive is past structure, but it is not past. It is present. Okay. What I'm saying is that instead of it is, you can say if it were made by. Okay, because if you say where, this is now a present and real, and it's not past. All right, it is present. All right, and the same here, right? I would prefer a. Remember, in this case, you can still listening, but it's advisable when you have preferred to use a infinitive or directly the noun. Okay, this is not incorrect, but in grammar, it's advisable to use listen. Okay, I would prefer to listen to opera.
Oh, yeah, right.
Right? If the performance, again here, were directed by the famous right director Pedro. Okay, the same. So a present and real plus infinitive, it is going to be the best option. And I think that's it. It's working good. The same here. If you want to use, no, actually, I'd rather have yoga classes if I felt, yes, actually, you optionally can use not the past, but the present and real felt.
Okay.
And here the same correction as above, right? The article of the and not necessarily using season. That's it. Those are my observations there. It is good. And again, it's great that you know this combination of words, even though this can be a simple lesson, the combination of those words sometimes can be confusing, and it's important to practice that. All right. That's it. We spent today's time in working these exercises, but I believe that it's worth practicing this as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have questions before finishing today, Matilda. Let me know.
No, I don't think so. It was very clear.
Okay, good. So please, let's finish this up. As always, you have the survey over there, and
Yep.
that's it. So I'll see you directly next week. All right. I hope you enjoy your
Yeah.
holiday, you enjoy your weekend, and see you, man. Thank
See you
you.
Monday. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye.